Welcome to Nutanix Weekly, hosted by me, Phil Sellers, CTO here at XenTegra. This season, we're going deeper into hybrid and multi-cloud strategy, deeper into real-world use cases, and deeper into how Nutanix simplifies everything with one platform, one-click operations, and a smarter way to manage IT. Whether you're running on-prem, in the cloud, or somewhere in between, this is the place to understand what's changing and what to do next. Thanks for joining us. Now let's get to the episode. Thanks for joining us. This is Nutanix Weekly, your podcast from XenTegra that has content with context. That's our way of saying we're bringing the best content about Nutanix to you, talking about it with the context of what we experience in the real world and how that applies to your business or your clients. I'm joined today with three great panelists. First up, a familiar name is Chris Calhoun, Solutions Architect here at XenTegra, former Nutanix and former customer as well. Chris, welcome and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Absolutely. Glad to participate. Thanks.
Also joining us is Andy Greene, another solutions architect here in the data center practice at XenTegra. Andy, also former Nutanix, former Cohesity SE, joins us with a lot of deep background in kind of the backup and recovery space. You spent some time with Lenovo. You've been pretty well rounded. So great to have you here, Andy.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And first time, I think, on our podcast, we're joined with Nutanix's Marcus Barton. Marcus is an enterprise sales engineer based out of the Georgia, Atlanta area, I believe. And Marcus, welcome for the first time.
Yeah, long-time listener, first-time participant.
Yeah, as we kind of teed up in our first episode, this is episode 2 of season 2. We've got a lot of changes. One of those being video and other things where you may be seeing this in a different format than you normally have. We've got some fun things coming up, like live episodes where you can join in and watch things live on LinkedIn or YouTube. So we've got all kinds of fun things planned this season, and we want you to participate. That's going to be one of the things that really changes. We want to hear from you as listeners. We want to know that you're out there. Send your questions, send your topics, and we really look forward to digging into those. But one of the other things that's changed, Mr. Jaira Cox, longtime personality on this podcast, is no longer with Nutanix. He's moved on to a new opportunity, and so we're really happy to have Marcus filling in as one of our subject matter experts, helping us navigate the space. Marcus, Chris, and I go way back. We've worked on accounts together, and so it's great to have another buddy on the podcast, because I'm curious, you relocated to Atlanta not that long ago. Is it feeling like home? Is it starting to make sense?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's about a year and a half, I guess, going on 2 years now. It definitely feels like home now. I'm at home on the team. I didn't change roles. I'm still a systems engineer, just like I was in the Carolinas. Just changed the team that I was on. So definitely feels like home.
That's great. Yeah, I did a big move about 10 years ago from the beach to Charlotte area, and I can't believe it's coming up on 10 years, but time flies really quickly, and it's been fun exploring and finding new restaurants and new things that you didn't have access to before, things that are uniquely in that new area where you're located. So I'm glad to hear that it's feeling like home.
And it is definitely sad to see Jaira move on to another role. It's big shoes to fill. It's really sharp guy, great person, and big shoes to fill on the podcast. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We definitely, from all of us here at XenTegra, wish him well and look forward to seeing him at conferences and other things out in the community. So for today's episode, we do want to dig in. We're going to talk about supply chain because honestly, there's probably no more timely topic than supply chain volatility. And so we've got a blog post here from Steve McDowell, a chief analyst and founder of Manned Research. It's posted out on Nutanix.com/blog. And the title of the blog post is Supply Chain Volatility is Rewriting the IT Playbook. So just to kind of tee us up, when we're working with clients, Chris, Andy, I'm curious from your perspective, as we're working with clients, what are typically the things that you hear from them that are most important as you're working with them to create a solution?
I would say, always top of mind is whether or not we can meet their timeline. We talk about getting the right solution at the right price, but at the end of the day, they have timelines around, renewals of existing hardware, software, some of which may or may not be able to be renewed again. And, they all have business constraints as well. Example, we're working with some school systems right now, and we need to get certain projects done over the summer break so that when they roll into the next school year, they're ready to go. So, I just want to highlight timeline. I think that's one of the key things here.
Yeah. Timeline for sure. Chris, what else do you hear in conversation?
I'll echo that for sure. Timeline and even the way things have been done in the past over the last refresh, the refresh before that, they use the same type perspective of, well, we've always started our projects, school system type stuff, the last week of school, and we have to be ready by that first week in August or last week in August, depending on the kids coming back, that type thing. So that's what's been done typically throughout their refresh cycles, hardware purchases, et cetera. And I think that with the constraints that we are seeing now, typical timelines, typical processes, the words typical probably should not be used anymore as far as availability and supply chain. So everything should have an asterisk beside it of to be determined. And I think that that's kind of where we are in the IT space right now,
Yeah, I think 100%, but I'm still fishing for a word that I'm not hearing. So Marcus, I'm going to come to you. What do you hear from your clients when you're working with them? And let's go back pre 2026. What's most important usually?
Yeah, most important is that they not only meet the time, like Chris is mentioning, meeting the timelines of their particular projects. And that's what we're hearing is with any kind of purchase, it's when does it have to be in place? And that usually is driven by some type of an application development team or some type of infrastructure team that needs the things in place by a certain time. And then we back it off from there of, all right, let's take a look at when you can take delivery of this. How long is it going to take to stand that up? So implementing it from the time that it hits your dock. And then we back off the shipping prior to that. And so a lot of our customers are now finding that they're having to stretch that out and plan out a little bit further in advance for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to weigh in here because I still didn't hear what I was looking for, but I can't believe the three of you didn't say price. Price has been king for so long with so many customers, right? They want the best price. And, especially when you're working with procurement teams, that is their mandate, is to get the best price. That may not be possible today with kind of what we're facing in supply chain. So I think as we go through the matrix, timeline is certainly a huge one. And you called that one out. Price is important because people have fixed budgets, but we also have availability. And I think that's another new dimension that generally hasn't mattered because we're able to get things in a timely enough fashion. Let's say pre-2006, availability was a lot less of an issue. I have seen this come before. During COVID, we also had some supply chain disruption with people not being able to import and get things out of the ports. So we saw supply chain slip around networking gear and we weren't able to get shipments for that. So availability is usually a lesser factor, but in this case, I think it's become the biggest factor as we kind of move forward. Well, let's dig in a little bit. What really is kind of going on from a supply chain perspective, Marcus? I'll come to you.
Well, what we're seeing is that, and a lot of people like to focus in on memory and GPUs as being part of the problem, but we're seeing it across the board when it comes to everything from memory to GPUs to even processors. And so the hyperscalers are sucking up a lot of that for AI workloads, and also some of the now what I call boutique model of infrastructure providers that are doing basically GPU as a service. So what they're doing is they're basically focusing just on AI workloads. We're not worried about containers. We're not worried about virtualization. We're not worried about software as a service. We're going to provide you with the platform that you need to be able to run your AI workloads. And so the combination of those hyperscalers and those AI workloads, especially with those boutique guys, they're really demanding a lot of those resources. And that has caused us to feel that pinch of the supply and demand, which is supply chain.
Yeah. Andy, we learned a new word at Nutanix.next a few weeks ago for what Marcus is talking about, those providers who are doing GPU as a service and very specific AI hosting. What is that term?
I believe it's Neo Cloud.
Yeah. And I'm not thinking the Matrix here, but that's immediately where my mind goes with the Neo Cloud. Maybe showing my age there, but yeah, I mean, that word has started popping up more and more in reporting, in news articles, industry magazines. So if you need to know what a Neo Cloud is, you heard it here first. So purpose-built AI infrastructure just for running AI workloads. That's a Neo Cloud. Chris, as we're kind of looking at the factors, we have increasingly seen costs rise. Talk a little bit about what you've experienced as we've been quoting. And then Andy, I want you to add in as well some of the things, just incidental stories about what we're seeing from a price increase.
For sure. What previously was quoted out from, I would say, just general predictive base price has now gone up 20-25%. And it started out of, hey, look, we can probably plan on 10 to 15. And then whenever that 10 to 15 was supposed to be here, it was already bumped up to 25. So I think that obviously there's tensions in the market, several factors, but it's beyond even the predictive numbers that you're trying to pad and really inform customers that, hey, look, I know that your planning and budget season is now, but here's where we are. You get a 2-week or even a 1-week quote that's valid, but then whenever you get that refreshed in a week or two, it's already increased in price. So I think that that's part of the trend analysis that we've seen is 20 to 25 rough numbers these last few weeks. Andy, what about you? Is that something that you've seen that target number, or is yours even higher?
Definitely. I mean, if we go back a few months, we're seeing some components. I think Marcus did a great call out with GPUs, memory, and CPUs. I've seen it with SSDs as well. Some of these additions to existing infrastructure, we're looking at from January to now, they've gone up X minimum and in some cases 3 times the cost just a few months ago. Around the lead times, we've seen those extend. Vendors telling us 60 days at one point, 70 days, 90 days, now up to 110 or more in some cases. And so, with that, I think we're seeing that in a lot of cases, lead times are really driving decision making. Having the right solution, having ensuring the right outcome is definitely still a part of that. But it also becomes a question of who has the hardware. How can we reconfigure it to reduce those lead times and make sure that we can hit the timeline that we need to hit that we talked about just a few minutes ago?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you're talking about availability of the parts really driving that timeline. A lot of our vendor partners, Lenovo, Dell, HPE, they're all navigating unique ways to ensure that they've got available parts and navigate customers towards the available parts so that the lead times can be mitigated. And programs like Top Choice within Lenovo are really interesting ways for us to do that, basing it upon the availability of the parts. We've always had that capability, Marcus, on the Nutanix side, with the sizing tool we use to create configurations for clients. We get signals in there of what parts are available, generally available, constrained, so that we can help when we're building things. Is that helping during this kind of difficult time with supply chain?
It definitely is. We can see the from Dell, Lenovo, AP. We don't have insight for that, and so we rely on those partners to provide us with the information as far as their supply chain goes. But if a customer's looking at the Nutanix nodes, the NX nodes, we definitely have insight into the individual components in those nodes and in those clusters as far as availability goes. And it seems like it's about 95 to 97%, to grab a number out of the air, about 95 to 97% accurate on its availability. And it's driving some of our customers' decision process. If I, as an SE, am looking at a configuration that a customer needs, I'm going to try and swizzle that configuration based upon the availability of parts while still meeting the needs of that customer. So maybe the 3.2 gigahertz processor has 110 lead time when the 3 gigahertz processor might be a little bit less, or likewise with SSD versus NVMe, or maybe the specific sizes of those drives that might have longer lead time. So we definitely try to make adjustments and still make the right decisions with what the customer needs.
And, another component, and the blog post goes into this, is, traditional procurement is about diversification, right? Making sure that you have multiple options, maybe even stockpiling some components. And so we're seeing our vendor partners doing that from a hardware perspective and guiding us towards those so that clients don't have to stockpile and they don't have to corner the market, because essentially what has happened is, we've got AI vendors and large cloud providers kind of taking up a large portion of the market. But I was listening to a keynote speaker last week from AMD. They feel a responsibility to make sure that they're not just 100% consumed by the hyperscale vendors. They also want to make sure that they have availability to all customers. And so, I think each of the manufacturers for the components you mentioned, Marcus, they're also trying to make sure that this isn't a terrible problem, but we do see those price increases. Chris, I know you and I are working on a quote for a customer right now. Last year, a single DIMM, 64 gig DIMM, to go in their servers was $150 something per DIMM. What's that price today? Kind of, what are we doing and looking to try and mitigate some of those things?
You said today. Well, 3 days ago, I knew how much it was. It was $1,025. Now, hopefully that price is still consistent. But those are the things. And I think that so far in our discussion, what we've talked about is creative ways to still meet the demands and the solution. So that's what we're having to do. We're reaching out to different manufacturers to find those resources. Because again, Philip, to your point, availability is now more important than the price. Everybody knows, and I think that that's why Andy and Marcus and I really didn't even say price, because it doesn't matter anymore as much. It's about who has the parts, and you just have to pay whatever the market value is. So to answer your question, it's $1,025 for a 64 gig DIMM stick for a Nutanix server. So of course you don't need just one. So multiply that by the quantity per server and then per cluster. So if you're adding additional resources, even to those generations a few years back, it adds up quickly. We're trying to evaluate whether it makes sense to go that route or even try to get new hardware to supplement some of these additional growth demands. And it kind of is a balance, of who has it and what the availability time is to actually get it to the customer.
Yeah, and one of the things that we see as a strategic advantage, particularly from the Nutanix platform, is that unified platform. Marcus, how does that contribute to making things easier for a client in this difficult supply chain situation?
Yeah, we've got a couple of different ways that we try to help from the Nutanix standpoint. If customers have immediate needs and they haven't planned on those longer supply chains, and they want to have the same look and feel of the Nutanix platform that they have on-prem, we offer NC2, what we call NC2 or Nutanix Cloud Clusters, which is basically running the Nutanix platform in the cloud on bare metal. So from a management standpoint, it just looks like another site that you might have on-prem. Allows you to migrate workloads by just replicating those workloads or moving those workloads from cluster to cluster. But it gives you that, what we like to call a bridge, so that you could spin up an NC2 instance in Azure or Amazon or GC2, GCP, and being able to have the platform run temporarily until you do get the supply that you need to run on-prem. So we definitely use that as one of our, what we like to call a bridge for that necessary workload. And again, it's something that's familiar because it's the unified platform. And then another way that we try to approach it from that platform is to support whatever hardware that you want to bring. So we've always done that. It's whether you want to run Lenovo or HPE or Dell or the Nutanix nodes, not trying to lock you into one type of platform like some of the other solutions out there do. And so you can run those different types of platforms. Whoever has the the shortest lead time is who you can purchase from and put in your data center and still run Nutanix on it. So that's the way that our unified platform really kind of helps that.
Well, that's two great use cases. And, the hyperscale cloud has ready available access. Andy, there's another place where we could potentially run things.
Absolutely. XenTegra Cloud. So, our managed service practice is built fully on Nutanix. We kicked out all of the 3-tier, all of the non-Nutanix stuff many, many years ago. And so, you have a third option there, which is full stack Nutanix running in our data center. So, I think we've always seen Nutanix as an operating system that gives you that portability for your workloads, whether we're running VMs or containers, whether we're running on-prem, at the edge, in the public cloud. But XenTegra Cloud really just extends that and gives our clients another option for where we might be able to swing those workloads temporarily until we can get that hardware in there.
That's a big factor, I think, is that we gain data portability by having this common unified platform. Chris, we're talking with more customers about stopgap measures, and NC2 may be a stopgap. XenTegra Cloud built on Nutanix may be a stopgap. That data portability story is pretty easy, but what makes it so easy?
To me, it's the built-in capabilities with Nutanix, because your source and target are, in this case, just operationally a data center, servers. The Nutanix platform as a whole can be migrated from even workloads outside of Nutanix using Nutanix Move. I think the convenience of that is really part of the platform. Being able to relocate workloads seamlessly with minimal downtime. That's the part where Nutanix really has planned ahead and really focuses on the benefit and end user customer experience of how can we make this a better usability experience overall. And Nutanix does that and tries to make the difficult tasks simple.
And I think that's a really important thing. We are seeing that simplification and the common data platform, the data layer being able to be leveraged as an important thing around portability. You're not having to relearn or adopt something different in each hyperscale cloud. You've got a very consistent way of running everything. Now, Marcus, there's another lever that they call out here, and it's a little newer from a Nutanix perspective, but it's really around extending hardware life. So what's that about?
So we've tried to meet our customers where they're at. And currently our customers are in situations where if they're already running Nutanix, they already have hardware on-prem that might be reaching the end of its life, and they have a situation where they may need to refresh that hardware. And so there's a couple of different approaches. We've tried to make it more flexible on our end when it comes to the renewal of that hardware and extending the life of that hardware. So we do have a capability internally that if you have that running, that you can make a request to us. We can run it up the flagpole on our end to see if we can get that extended. But there's another approach as well, and that is let's take those two renewals. So if you look at the renewal of that hardware and the renewal of the software and separate those out. So many years ago, we disaggregated the hardware from the software. That's still true today. And so having the renewal of that refresh of that hardware being separate from the renewal of their software is one of those ways that we do try to increase that. And then there's also taking advantage of existing hardware that you may have on-prem that's not running Nutanix. So we do have a hardware compatibility list, and my job as an SE is to help customers look at the hardware that they already have running that still has life in them, that might be running standalone servers, might be running alternate platforms like VMware and whatnot. And we can look at that hardware to see if it can be supported to run Nutanix, extending the life of that hardware. And it might be that they may need a different network card, or there might be an incompatible drive type or whatnot. But my job as an SE is to look at all those components and help define what might need to be refreshed in that. So a couple of different avenues when it comes to trying to extend hardware lifecycle.
Yeah, and that's aided by another strategic move that Nutanix is doing, and that's external storage. So, from an external storage perspective, now you've got reuse of not only your compute, but also your storage access. Andy, what sorts of storage are we talking about here?
Yeah, so in the past, we've seen this with Dell and Pure. Next, in last year, in 2025, Nutanix and Pure announced their partnership, and I think that's been a real hit, especially for those clients who had existing investment in Pure. And, we all know that it's a really, great fit. More recently at .next this year, they announced the partnership with NetApp. So we're seeing Nutanix really branch out into supporting these, what we would traditionally call 3-tier type infrastructure, where Nutanix is bringing the hypervisor, the compute, and the memory, but we're still able to leverage some of those existing investments or, possibly even preferences in storage providers.
100%. And you forgot one. Dell's also been a longtime partner. Chris, what do we have in the Dell camp?
So from the Dell side, we've got all of the power flex, power this, power that. Just kidding. But let me tell you a quick aside story. I've got a customer that is specifically excited about the NetApp announcement. They are planning for the future, and they've just invested into a couple NetApp appliances, and they're looking to reuse that. So to me, that just the decision overall opens doors now for Nutanix that were previously closed because customers wouldn't even consider that. And I think that's a big sway to Nutanix perspective of, hey, we're listening. We are paying attention to what customers are asking for and wanting. And I think that's really key too. Now to go back to your question about the power environment. Sorry, I had something on my mind and I had to say it before I forgot. I'm getting old. So the question was, today's Monday. That was the answer to your question. No, what was the question, Philip? Sorry.
Which of the Dell platforms are supported from an external storage? I'll go first. The OG was PowerFlex. That was the original one, but we also got which one during .next this year?
We've got PowerStore, and then let's see, whatever the next power feature is.
That's
us out,
for
guys.
now, though, right?
Yeah,
I think it's just PowerFlex and PowerStore. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And
more to
tuned,
come.
whatever the
is
next
the story.
power is, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of this is that, we have levers to turn. And so you have choices as a customer at this point that maybe you don't have otherwise. I think that's one of the things that we realize from a Nutanix perspective. We're about enabling customer choice. And so, this is a platform. It is software only. You can choose whichever hardware vendor has inventory, has lowest lead time, has best price. So you can evaluate the things that are most important to you. But, the volatility is still there. And so it's a major problem we're all dealing with, but just know that Nutanix can help with some mitigating strategies to kind of help you get around those things. Now, the blog post goes on to say that security and compliance is still also extremely important. Security has to maintain consistency. It's got to be enforceable. Marcus, where does Nutanix help in that regard?
Well, first and foremost, I think that something, if you're unfamiliar with Nutanix, is that we have a platform-first approach when it comes to security. Some of our first customers, as we became a company, were governmental and three-letter agencies and military, and so they demanded right off the bat that we built it from the ground up with security in mind, as opposed to let's build something and then you got to harden it or add things to it to secure it. And so that security-first approach when it comes to security in our model is important. But it also comes back to having the ability to be able to recover from disasters, whether that might be ransomware or whether it might be something that Mother Nature threw at us. And so being able to recover from that is vitally important. And so we have DR kind of built in. And when we talk about replicating workloads to offsite and then being able to spin those up and depending on whatever RPO that you might have. So having that ability. And then also when it comes to making sure that the platform stays resilient and stays secure is very, very important to us. And so we make sure that we keep our software up to date and we roll out patches and security patches as important as soon as possible. We have a regular cadence that gets released, and we want to make sure that the customers have that in their hands as soon as they can.
Yeah, and good lifecycle management is really important. You've made that easy with Lifecycle Manager built into the platform, handles it almost like your patching concierge, and plans everything out and makes it easy to attain.
Also gives you the ability to be able to pick and choose what's important to you as well. Yep. Very, very easy.
And I'll jump in too.
And that's regardless of what platform you're on, whether it's Dell or HP or NX nodes. We help you with those security patches, not only from our software standpoint, but also from firmware updates on those platforms.
Yeah, to Marcus's point, obviously security is ultimate mindset from the outset of the solution, but you also have ways to extend that security as part of you mentioned ransomware, Nutanix capabilities around flow network security, segmenting off east-west traffic, I think is really important to call out there too, of being able to reduce the footprint and the threat. Yet it's baked in, but you also have alliance partners and security partners that are able to take configurations, ingest those into Nutanix from a networking perspective to make sure that you've got a full scope solution in place that is hardened, like you said, Marcus, from the outset. And that's really the key, that it stays that way, not manually done by a person who has to go through a sheet of 50 steps and hope that they didn't miss one. And I think that that's really a key call out there too.
Yep. Yep. From an automation standpoint, perfect example is I have a customer that has 50 or 60 sites, and there's 3 clusters in each one of those sites, and they're building them all out. And so we helped them with automation to not only stand up the cluster itself, but also to deploy the standardized workloads that they have in those environments. And security is obviously very, very important there. And when it comes to the timing and aspect, if it's 10 or 11 VMs in these remote sites, doesn't sound like a whole lot. But when you have to do it times 41, 45 times 3 clusters, that adds up real quick. And to your point, if they had to do each one of those manually, there's always going to be steps that could be missed. Applying a patch or turning off a secondary NIC, whatever it might be from that standpoint. It's very, very important that that's automated.
And for companies that are regulated and maybe they have to meet some compliance standard, you've also got Security Central, which is going to help you demonstrate and audit all of these settings and really kind of roll that up and help you remediate any sort of misconfigurations, so that all of this goodness we've just talked about is also demonstrated back to the auditors, which helps you hopefully have an easier time next time you're going through PCI, NIST, HIPAA sort of evaluations with your organization. So as we kind of wrap up here, the last section of the blog post is talking about the IT leader's mandate. So I'm going to go through, and I guess, Andy, I'm going to kind of turn to you. What are the 6 different things that IT leaders require?
Well, it's a immediate access to capacity, that cloud-like ability to spin up resources on demand or close to on demand, multi-vendor flexibility, right? The ability to bring in hardware from multiple different vendors to make sure that we're hitting those timelines, hitting those budgets that we talked about were so important earlier in the call. Extending hardware lifecycles where we have hardware, if it's working well and it's still still doing the job, we may look at extending that and how we can get the absolute most life out of that hardware. And then workload portability, that ability to run the workload wherever it makes sense, and that can be from an availability standpoint or also from a price standpoint. We find that we can run it cheaper somewhere else. It may make sense to move that workload. But anytime we're talking about moving those workloads around, we've got to have automation and consistency. That's just the key to preventing human error, making sure that we're not introducing security vulnerabilities or making mistakes that can cost us in the long run. And I think that really ties into what we talked about earlier with built-in security. Nutanix has always been a very secure platform right out of the box. It's part of that DoD approved products list. They've got the machine-readable STIGs and all the goodness built into Flow Network Security and Security Central. So, it is a very secure platform right out of the box.
Chris, as we're wrapping up, I think it's important to think about what is IT's number one job? What is that at the end of the day?
Well, of course, if you think about it, it's overall that you've got to deliver a stable infrastructure environment that meets the business needs. That's the bottom line. But the thing that is the variable with today's challenge may be something different on tomorrow's challenge. So it's got to be adaptable and flexible, but it's got to meet today's needs. But the capability is such that it's flexible enough so that the business is continuing to be successful in the long run. And I think that that's something that you plan for now, and then allow for the infrastructure to really be moldable and adaptable and flexible. And all of those qualities are what Nutanix offers.
And Marcus, kind of to wrap us up here, the unified platform, how does that deliver or solve for the things Chris just said? Number one job for the organization. Now, how do we solve for that?
I think that the importance is that we provide you with a flexible platform. And that flexibility, like we mentioned earlier, comes in choice of hardware and choice of where you want to run your workloads, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in XenTegra's cloud or whether it's in public cloud. So giving you that flexibility, that freedom of making the choice that makes sense to you. And some of that might be related on availability. Some of that might be related on cost, but also to provide you with the ability to run your platform and be able to sustain that platform across lifecycles, across the different platforms, across whatever type of applications that you're implementing, whatever type of transformation that you're going through, being able to provide that and be able to do so in a very predictable manner. Because as we know, the supply chain is very unpredictable right now. So if we can make our platform predictable, that's one less thing you've got to worry about.
Oh, yeah. And I love that you mentioned transformation. This has been a buzzword in the industry for probably 15 years now. Digital transformation. All companies are going through their version of digital transformation. And I will be quick to point out the entire episode, we've really been talking about solving for keeping the lights on, being a stable platform and the base infrastructure on which that transformation takes place. And it's accelerating with AI. And so we're really not focused on the higher level benefits to a business where the business is really focused. This is all about that enabling platform so that we don't have to think about the platform. We can just focus on the outcome, the transformation, that important work. So at the end of the day, what we're actually trying to deliver here is that stable infrastructure that lets the business do what it wants to do, lets it grow, lets it invest in AI, lets it build new applications, tap into data, and at the end of the day, become more profitable. I think that's the business outcome we all have to keep in mind as IT practitioners. And, supply chain is just another wrinkle we have to deal with. But the mandate is really, how do we help our business transform and succeed? So, guys, I want to thank you for the conversation. Really enjoyed this. Looking forward to the next conversation. And I appreciate each of you, your perspectives, and hope you have a great rest of your day. For everyone listening, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.